Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop. My name is Tom Orr. It is Tuesday, June 10th, 2020. This is your daily Buckeye fix from BuckeyeScoop.com. Today we're joined by Ross Fulton. Ross is the X's and O's guru for BuckeyeScoop.com. Ross, thank you for joining us. And for those who might be just learning about your work for the first time, can you just share a little bit about how you got started?
Sure. Thanks, Tom, for having me. So I guess to make a long story relatively short, I obviously grew up playing football and always enjoyed the X's and O's part of it. Would, frequently take charge of calling plays for my team, etc. growing up, and kind of always had a thought that I'd go into coaching, and instead ended up becoming a boring lawyer like many people. But, about a decade ago, I was actually sitting on a message board and saw people break down. I remember I think it was like a 2007 Ohio State win against Illinois, which was a typical ugly Jim Tressel win. And, I saw lots of people complaining and gave my thoughts, and people liked it. And it sort of took off from there. And so I've written for 11 Warriors and at Rivals, and now I'm excited to be here at Buckeye Scoop. But this X's and O's has always been a fun way for me to scratch my the coaching itch without actually putting in the 90-hour days and moving every other year.
Now, I think everyone has kind of their own favorite schemes or offenses or defenses. I am personally kind of a football weirdo where my two favorite offenses are the air raid and the service academy style triple option out of the flex bone. So I'm like a football extremist. Do you have anything that is like either side of the ball that is like the platonic ideal of football to you?
I can see as the benefit of anything, as long as, especially on offense, what frustrates me no matter what kind of offense you're running is if you're running into a situation where the arithmetic isn't on your side and you're making things difficult on yourself. I think as long as you use constraint plays, I'm good with different styles. I guess I would say I always will have a soft spot in my heart for the wing tee, since that's probably the first offense I learned as a kid. I've obviously become a spread convert over the last decade or so.
Today we're going to be talking a little bit more on the defensive side of the ball. Ohio State, obviously, from 2018 to 2019, with the Urban Meyer to Ryan Day transition and the Greg Schiano to Jeff Hafley transition, and some of the personnel changes that happened that year. There was a pretty big, and you don't need to be too much of an X's O's guru to recognize that there was some pretty significant change in the results on the field there between those two seasons from the Ohio State defense. Last year basically looked like a best-case scenario for them, and some of that was probably that coaching staff and the personnel, but also the scheme. Ryan Day has told us during interviews he likes that one high system that they ran last year, and that was kind of the first time that was their kind of main defense, I think. Just because that was, as an offensive guy, that was kind of a pain to game plan against. Can you sort of explain a little bit about what that one high system means and what makes it kind of challenging for the offense?
Yeah, so, at its base, it really just means that you have the middle of the field safety, the middle of the field covered by a safety. And so there's essentially two ways to play coverage in modern football. You can have a split safety scheme, which is often denoted by like even numbers, cover 2, cover 4, and there's a million variations off of that. Or odd numbers, which means the middle of the field is closed with a single high safety, which is cover 1, or man coverage with the free safety as a sort of free defender, and then cover 3, which is just you break up the deep part of the field into thirds, with the safety taking the middle third and the two corners. There's again variations, but taking each third on the outside. And so, it's actually kind of funny because under Greg Schiano, Ohio State was still primarily a middle of the field covered defense. They ran overwhelmingly cover 1. Their problem at the end was A, personnel to do it, and B, they just got predictable. They were just did too frequently. So, just as I was saying the last conversation about offense, if anything's predictable on either side, eventually opponents are going to get you on it because nothing's perfect and there's weaknesses to everything. And so what helped Ohio State last year is, even though we call them single high, they switched coverages between still played a lot of cover 1, but they also played a lot of cover 3. And so teams could not predict necessarily just by alignment pre-snap which one they were going to be in. And so that aided them throughout the season. I think they caught people a little off guard at the beginning, which made it even easier for them because, you see that this kind of scheme, really Pete Carroll has kind of made it famous with the Seahawks and his Legion of Boom, and then it's been taken to the 49ers, and they run it. But you don't see it a lot in college football because of the spread. And so I think people weren't entirely ready for it, but even as the season progressed, it was pretty adaptable. It worked for them.
They have, coming into this year, lost a lot of important pieces off of that defense from last year. Chase Young, Devon Hamilton, Robert Landers, Malik Harrison, Jeff Okudah, Damon Arnette, Jordan Fuller. How much of an impact do you think that might have on their ability to run something similar this year? Is that something that's kind of personnel dependent or something that they can run kind of no matter what?
It should be something they should run no matter what. So, back to your previous question, I think Ryan Day likes it. So at a big level, you saw, especially, let's say 5 to 10 years ago, especially with like the rise of Mark D'Antonio at Michigan State, cover 4 or quarters became all the rage in college football. Ohio State ran it under Chris Ash when they won the national championship. And the benefit of cover 4 is that it makes both of your safeties available in the run game. And so, again, especially against zone reads or quarterback runs, you now have 9 defenders to play the run, and you can bring the backside safety down to account for the quarterback. But then what happened was then run-pass options became popular. And run-pass options, you can really hurt that backside safety by putting them in a run-pass conflict, so they don't know whether it's a run or a pass. And that leads to a lot of explosive plays. And so what I think Ryan Day likes about the Singlehigh scheme is it really limits those run-pass options because – if you, in your mind, think about you have every receiver covered up in your typical 3 wide receiver set. Last year you had Sean Wade covering up the slot defender and then the free safety free. So there's no one in a conflict on run pass options. And so the same principles should apply going forward. Now, definitely the free safety position, when you're playing that middle of the field safety, it puts a lot on that defender to prevent big plays from becoming really big plays. There's a big difference between a 20-yarder and a 65-yard touchdown. And Jordan Fuller added a lot in that respect last year for Ohio State. So to me, that is going to be a big challenge to replace him. Obviously Chase Young, Jeff Okudah are just fantastic players. But Ohio State does have depth, especially at the defensive end position. So I think how the secondary handles that will be a big key.
Now, this is a defense that I don't think Kerry Combs has a lot of experience, and he definitely hasn't run it before. But Greg Mattison did. How much of an impact? I think a lot of this was kind of Jeff Hafley's defense last year that Greg Mattison sort of was learning. How much of an impact do you think the loss of Hafley might have on them this year? And is that something that Kerry Combs is going to be able to just sort of, if he hasn't done this before, will be able to pick up pretty quickly and hit the ground running with?
Yeah, that's one of my big unanswered questions. So as I said, Hafley learned it with the 49ers, where they've been running it the past few years. And so, Madison was there, but I think Hafley primarily handled the back end of the defense. And, it's one thing to be able to run, Kerry Combs has run cover 1 and cover 3 his entire life. Those aren't like fancy concepts. Those have been around for football for, decades and decades. And so, and when he was with the Titans, they ran of every variety of coverage possible, like most NFL teams do. So he's certainly familiar. The question is, how familiar is he going to be able to make like subtle adjustments in the game? And so, like, one example I use is like against Michigan last year. Michigan really exploited the sort of intermediate middle zone underneath the deep safety and past the linebackers. And so Hafley adjusted the second half, and they used a lot more what's called cover 3 buzz. And so, again, you change who's the 3 deep defenders, and one of the safeties sort of drops into that intermediate zone, and it took away a lot of that. And so that's just like a small change that you're not going to notice, right away watching it live, but it made a big difference. And so, I do think, though, that said, that Ohio State does need to add in a little bit more variety, a little bit more split safety coverage. That was sort of exposed against Clemson. And so I do think on that sense, I think Coombs will bring in, a little bit more weight that could be helpful.
You mentioned the fact that a lot of this is going to be on Josh Proctor, and he's, he has certainly the pedigree and has flashed the ability to be the kind of safety that I think they need him to be, but it definitely has not been consistent, and you saw some big plays hit while he was in there against Clemson. Is there a point during fall camp or during the course of the season that they're going to have to be able to know that they trust him to be able to run what they want to run, or is this something you can kind of, if you get a couple weeks into the season and go, like, we just have to scrap this is just not working right now, that they can do that and not have to completely blow up the whole season?
Yeah, it's a great question. I really do think that they should be pretty comfortable already with how he can handle it, because even if he didn't have a ton of game reps last year, he had a ton of practice reps doing it. So they should see a lot. And, to his defense, he was put in a tough situation. I actually think it hurt Ohio State last year that they did not face a really, frankly, proficient passing team until Clemson, because they weren't forced to use a lot of nickel and bring in additional safety. And so suddenly you're playing in the biggest game of the year, and Josh Proctor, who has very few reps, is in on the most important situations. And so, that's tough on anyone. And I think they would have benefited last year from getting more game reps and nickel. And so I think Proctor will be fine. But you're right. The biggest thing in that position is do no harm. You want someone who is conservative and makes the stops you need. And from there, you can get to a Malik Hooker who's roaming over the field. But the first thing you need to do is make sound plays. And, I think they'll have to know that pretty soon by Oregon.
One more thing before we let you go. The one thing that they had talked about last year was 2 years ago, the defense was just kind of too complex. Like, guys were just thinking too much out on the field, and you saw guys like the gears turning in guys' heads and not just kind of reacting and going and playing fast. Last year, they tried to simplify things and just be able to basically just say, go get them, more or less. What was it that they were able to do last year that made the defense simple for the players on Ohio State, but at the same time complex for, you said it can't be too simple, you can't be too repetitive. What was it that made it easy for Ohio State players to read, react, and go, and complex for opponents to be able to read the same thing?
Yeah, so I think that Schiano's system put a lot of pressure, especially on the linebackers and especially in nickel, to be responsible for two gaps or have two different reads, run pass read or have to cover two gaps. And that just puts a lot on any player, especially when, Ohio State now is in essentially going into the third year with the same group of linebackers, but those guys were all very young then. And, none of them are, what I would call superstars even at this point. And so, that's, again, when you're in a one-on-one situation and the linebacker fills the wrong hole, and you're in cover one and everyone's packs return, that leads to big plays. And so last year, they put essentially more on the coaches. So as I said, it may look the same pre-snap, but sometimes they're in cover one, sometimes they're in cover three, sometimes they use a cover three fire zone, which is a zone blitz. And so it made it easier for the players only have to fulfill their one responsibility within that scheme. And, each linebacker just had a single gap, and that's the benefit of a single high, is you can have every gap accounted for. But they didn't, but it puts more on the coaches to guess right and keep the opponent off balance, but less on the players.
Ross will be holding a Q&A on the Insiders board a little bit later on today. You can go to BuckeyeScoop.com and sign up to be a part of that conversation. I'm really looking forward to that. There are some questions that he's been asked already that I thought, I'd be interested in learning a little bit more about that. So that's probably worth your time today. So go to BuckeyeScoop.com and sign up to check that out. Ross, thank you for joining us today. If you are interested in checking out this podcast on Apple Podcasts and downloading and subscribing right there, just go to your Apple Podcast app and search Buckeye Scoop, and you can listen and subscribe right there. I would also encourage you to check out BuckeyeScoop.com. We've got some great free content available, plus some incredible articles and other content on the Insider board that's definitely worth your time and your attention. We are building a great community that is just getting bigger and better every day there. I would encourage you to go check that out. And if you are a father, hey, this might be a good thing to ask for Father's Day, a membership to BuckeyeScoop.com. And if you have a father, hey, this might be a good thing to give him for Father's Day. You can go to BuckeyeScoop.com to learn more about that. That'll do it for today. I'm Tom Moore for The Morning Scoop. We will talk to you tomorrow.